Hello, this is Mr. Reynolds, and hopefully you just saw the video on the heart dissection, which was fun. Which It was half a sheep heart. It didn't show everything that I wanted it to, but it was still pretty cool. So hopefully you just saw that and answered a couple questions on that in OneNote, and now you're listening to this thing. And what this is, it's we want to do an introduction to circulation. Since we start with the heart, we need to get blood and oxygen and the nutrients in the blood to every single thing in the body. So when I was doing this the first time, I had about 30 slides. I'm keeping it light, and because we'll need to do some review of different systems. So I've gone back and I pulled things with just some general circulation and structure of some of the blood vessels is what I want to look at this one. A few questions after this, and that'll be it. And we'll have more tomorrow, and you'll see a number of these same slides again. And by the way, if you hear someone else here, my son is home helping me with these presentations. So onward we go, and you can see on this slide we're doing circulation, and with the circulation we already studied the heart, and the heart pumps it out. It's going to go into the arteries, still some real high pressure in those arteries, into the microscopic capillaries, which we used to not be able to see with microscopes, that we'll go into some, and then into small veins, larger veins, big veins, vena cavas, back into the heart. Okay, and that's how the cycle keeps going on it. Okay, next slide on it. So this is some review of some structures of the heart that we saw. We saw the blood come in the superior and the inferior vena cavas and gather here in the right atrium, pump through the valve into the right ventricle, pumped out of the right ventricle through the semilunar valves into the pulmonary trunk, pulmonary arteries, off to the lungs. From the lungs, it came back through the pulmonary veins, collected in the left atrium, pumped down to the left ventricle, pumped out to the rest of the body, going underneath here, out the aorta. Okay. One thing we mentioned, this as the aorta takes a 180, this is the descending aorta. Okay. You'll need to eventually name these three main sections coming off, but we'll keep a constant flow of blood to the brain through this one. I think this is going to go to the right arm, and this is going to go to the left arm, okay, through some clavine veins. I'm sorry, some clavine arteries. We mentioned down here the left ventricle should be the thickest walled one, since it's got to pump blood out to all the rest of the body. Okay, next. So this is another look at the the system, the cycle, where we pump the blood out of the heart. We've studied that some. And from the heart, out the aorta, okay, out the aorta, it's going to go into arteries, smaller arteries or arterioles, into capillaries, into the veins, basically venules, then veins, and from the veins, it's coming back to the heart. Let's go in this vena cava, back to the heart. Okay. Um, you you colored these, I think, the other day. The outermost layer is the pericardium, then the thick muscle layer. Myo refers to muscle, the muscle of the heart, and then you color. Oh, there it is, an endocardium. Okay. We sit on the ventricles. This should be pretty thick. All right. This is a look at the cross sections of an artery compared to a vein. All right. Now the pressure when it comes out of the heart, there's a lot of pressure going through the arteries, so they better be pretty strong. And you notice the extra thickness in here of the muscle lining, the muscle fibers, and some elastic fibers in here. Compared over here to the vein, it's not nearly as much. Okay. There's actually very little. There's not much pressure in the veins at all. Okay, in the fluid exerting force on there, there's just not very much. Okay, there's a lot of force from the fluid, from the blood plasma against the sides of these arteries. Better be pretty strong. Okay, um, At first when I saw this, I said, what does the T stand for? Oh, transverse section. Transverse is across, okay, kind of like that. And what we call it, another name for it that we had on a quiz was cross section. You cut it in half and look in at the cut off portion. That's a cross section view or a transverse cut. All right. Another difference is with arteries and veins. One, besides the arteries being a whole lot thicker than the veins because the pressure of the fluid is greater, the veins, picture a vein coming from the foot up the leg, not much pressure. You know, when the heart beats, it's going to push it on some, and when it's not, when the heart beats, it's going to push it on some. When it's not beating, gravity's going to try to pull it back down. And when it's doing that, the valves will slam shut. So notice the valves are in the veins only. The arteries do not have any valves, okay? All right, because there's enough blood pressure to push it on. But in fact, they've said that, I think it's been said that 80% of your blood volume is in your veins. Okay, slowly making its way back to the heart. And one thing that helps with it was with muscles contracting and pushing on the sides of these veins, it squeezes the blood forward. So that's why most of your coaches, if you're real tired after some event, they tell you walk around, don't sit down, keep walking, keep moving, jog some, walk around a little bit, stretch a little bit, do not stop, do not lay down, do not sit down, get him up. Because we want to keep it moving, and that's what keeps the blood moving in the veins back to the heart, then to the lungs to get reoxygenated. Okay. Here's a list of names again. After the artery, that's a little bit larger vessel, and as we get smaller, still in the arteries, arterioles. Now this is cool. You can see some of the smooth muscles around the arterioles. When someone takes some blood pressure medicine, the blood pressure is too high, it helps to relax these muscles. As it relaxes, there's less pressure exerted on the fluid in here, so the blood pressure is less. Okay, so the first thing it does is release the pressure in those. And then so the blood goes from the arteries to the arterioles, a little bit smaller, to a capillary, really small, one layer of cell thickness. This is where all the oxygen and carbon dioxide gets exchanged, and you'll see that again. Okay, these may be the most important blood vessels in the body. Some argue that. Okay, now it's coming back in the venous system, so we've got some venules, and then larger ones are veins, bigger veins, and up to vena caves. Okay. And another look at those. So here we go. Notice artery thicker, vein not nearly as thick. So blood is going through the artery out to the body. Gets into, we can call these arterioles, little bitty arteries. And then we have some capillaries. Oxygen's exchanged there. Then we have some venules, spelled a little bit differently than veins, venules, into veins, back to big veins. Notice the valves here in the veins, back to the vena cavas, to the heart. Right? Another look at it, and let's make note here on this one. We always knew that we had a closed circulatory system. Closed circulatory system, because the blood would go out and we didn't get bruising. Okay, in some other organisms it's called an open circulatory system. I think a crayfish has this, for example, where the heart pumps it out into a big aorta, and then there's no vessels. It goes into a big chamber, and the blood just bathes all the different internal organs from it. Then it collects again in a big vena cava and taken back to the heart. They always knew that ours was closed, even though for a while the microscopes were not good enough to see these capillaries. The capillaries were considered to be a missing link in the circulatory system. They knew that something was there, we just couldn't see it because there wasn't blood flowing all over the place that we could see. We knew it was still in little vessels. We could see it coming out through arteries and arterioles. Then we saw nothing. Our microscopes weren't good enough. Then we saw little bitty veins or venules. Then we saw veins. And so we saw it going out and coming back, but we didn't see it all the way. Okay, so the capillaries were the missing link in the circulatory system. Okay, here's a look at the capillary. Notice how it's only wide enough for one donut-shaped red blood cell to go through at a time. And I've described these as donut shaped before, even kind of where the hole would be, and you pinch it. I'd say the membrane's pinched in. There's not really a hole there, but the membrane is pinched in that position. So this is considered a regular normal shaped red blood cell. The different coloration, the reddish is supposed to mean that it's carrying oxygen. At capillary, it's oxygen is given off to, let's say, the muscle, okay? And then the muscle that's been working gives carbon dioxide into it. Most people miss this part. This hemoglobin of the red blood cell picks up carries carbon dioxide also. Once it dumps off the oxygen, it's open, it's free, it bonds onto the CO2. And then it makes its way back through the veins to the heart, into the lungs, okay? Another thing that we'll have to look at here is lymphatic system, and where we studied before, even down here in the legs, the lymph, it's picking up old debris, dead bacterial cell bodies, dead cell parts, interstitial fluid making its way into there, becoming lymphatic fluid, and making its way back up. And remember, it gets dumped in right here. We'll see this more tomorrow. In the thoracic duct, where the lymph node leads back into the left subclavian vein, and over in the right subclavian vein, the right thoracic duct empties its lymphatic fluid into this right lymphatic duct. Okay, and we'll see in a diagram tomorrow that the right lymphatic duct pretty much takes care of only stuff up here. Okay, in this upper right quadrant, including this half of the brain also, and this part of the arm and this torso. All the rest of the body is draining into the lymphatic duct. Okay, and like I said, we'll see that again tomorrow. After the blood comes out the heart, and here's the heart right there. I see a little bit of the aorta right in there. Okay, as it comes up behind the thymus, here's its three main branches coming up and off. When you know that. Meanwhile, behind the thymus, it's taking its 180-degree turn and going down behind all this stuff. And this blood has to go, it has to go to all these different lobes of the lungs. It has to go to the diaphragm. It has to go to the liver, stomach, spleen. This is a little bit, this green thing down here is the gallbladder sticking out. So blood has to go to all that. Blood has to come back to the heart. Okay, the heart doesn't get any oxygen, carbon dioxide exchange as blood is going through the heart that you learned. So we have coronary arteries that come back to the heart. Okay, now let's move some of these organs off to the side a little bit. We can see that descending aorta, and another look at all the organs that the bloodstream supplies. You can see the one big descending aorta here. Okay, the descending aorta would be this one, all the way down. Once it starts coming down from here at the very, very top part of it, that starts to be my descending aorta. Okay, and then you see all these little branches coming off. The hepatic artery goes to the liver. You've heard hepatitis. Renal failure. The renal artery goes to the kidney. Okay. This is kind of cool, where right above the kidney is the adrenal gland that makes adrenaline. Well, the name of this vessel is the suprarenal. Interesting. It's above the renal one. We'll learn a little bit more about the small intestines and the large intestines tomorrow. There's some parts of the large intestine. Here's part of this only part of the small intestine they're showing here. Mesentery is that mesh-like stuff in between there. We'll look at that tomorrow also. And here, down here in the right, in the common iliac, you remember the word ilium. Iliac is lower back, iliac region. So this is still in the lower back, but you can tell it's getting ready to spread out to each of the legs. So diagram. So we see the iliac ones going down each leg, becoming part of the femoral arteries, going all the way down to the feet, nourishing that stuff. Ooh, and then so it's down the artery, making its way through capillaries, the muscles. Oxygen gets exchanged here, right? Actually, oxygen goes out to the muscles, carbon dioxide in, back through the veins, venules, veins, vena cavas, through whatever valves, all the way up to the heart. Okay. All right, so like I said, and once it's in the veins, it's going to be making its way back up to the heart. And the last two things that we've seen are the inferior vena cava, the superior vena cava, as it goes into the right atrium of the heart. Okay, and then that cycle kind of starts again. So again, this was showing just kind of another look at it. Here's from the legs. Here's the blood coming up the veins, all the way up, up, up. And here's a little part of the small intestine. See a little bit more tomorrow. We have one major trunk coming up. This is descending aorta. It's collecting all the blood from below and coming back to the heart through the inferior vena cava. Everything from above, superior vena cava, and we start the flow of blood again. And this is